Now we've had so much rain that we've hardly been able to work in the garden after going a long period of time earlier this spring where it was really quite dry through the winter and early spring. And I've been waiting to come out here and prune some things when there's not a lot of water on them, because it's the funnest thing in the world to be inside the plants while they're absolutely covered in water. But sometimes you get something like this Rosalinda Indian Hawthorne where we've tree farmed it like this. It's got so much weight on it from all this rain that I need to go ahead and prune it just to make sure that it's not going to ultimately damage itself in some way. If we get a big wind while it has all this weight on the leaves, then could have an issue, because the trunk is not big enough to carry all of this foliage that's up here on the top. This is a pink flowering, very, very fragrant Indian Hawthorne. If you haven't followed along with the channel, it's one of Steph's favorite plants in the garden. When it comes into flower, it has giant clusters of pink, very, very fragrant flowers. Very different than other Indian Hawthorns, and really kind of becomes a tree like you're seeing here. One at the Ralston Arboretum that is, in fact, pretty much a tree. It's 15 feet tall and 15 feet wide, something like that. A little cold sensitive to start, but I will say once it's gotten this size on it and it become this vigorous, it wasn't even phased by the winter in the least little bit. 2 years ago when it went in the ground, if we'd had a winter like we just had, it would have probably been damaged. So protect it for the first few years. Okay, so we have a path, believe it or not, that goes through here. We currently have a fence around a lot of our annuals back here, keeping the rabbits out, but I'm about to take it down. And then there's a path that's supposed to go through here, but as you can see, the Rosalinda Indian Hawthorne is definitely preventing that. I've got a place last year where you can see I cut it, okay? And then I got 3 different separate limbs that initiated from that. I can just cut that back to the same exact spot if I want to, but I think this is still going to be in my face a bit, so I'll take that off as well. But anywhere I go back, you can see right here, same thing. Can they see that stuff, you think? I cut that all the way back into there last year. You can see where this very long limb grew out of that in a single season, like 3 feet long. So I'll cut it there again. That'll be fine. And then up here, I just probably need to reduce the weight as much as anything, and it'll stand back up on its own some of these lower branches that are just weighting it down. But I think, Steph, it's probably time to take this out entirely, right? This limb right here. Okay, all right. So I'm going to take that one out. That's a much larger limb down here, right there. I think it's definitely time for that to go.
That's a good call.
Yeah, I think last year was we probably passed on it, and okay. Does that need to go too? Probably go ahead and go. Okay. A lot of times, and I'll show you this, what I'm looking at here, the branch comes out and one piece goes up like that, and then that piece goes up, and then that piece goes up, but then there's one just hanging down below it. That's the one I want to get off of there. That is never going to correct itself. It's never going to get up and out of the way just because of the direction it was going. I'm sure this conifer down here will be much happier having us done a bit of this. Got another one back there. I'm just cutting it back to the same spot I cut it back to last year. And now we can start to walk through here, right? After a couple of weeks. If you want to stand back, Steph, I think I'll just cut. You think it stood back up some?
A little bit.
Really? This was our fear, is that it's actually being pulled over, and I don't know if it is or isn't, but there's a lot of foliage on this thing. It's weird to say a plant's too happy, but in this case, it has grown. I'm gonna take that off. Anything that's up and away from the plant like that stuff that you see. This one right here, maybe. And this one right here coming out the front. I'm cutting back. So I've got basically where I cut last year, it branched into 3. I'm just taking the longest, heaviest one out of that. And it doesn't really look like I've pruned it at all when I do that. Like right here, if I already took that one. But is there another example of that on this side?
Huh? Don't do anything more in the front.
Not take this one?
You can do that, but that's a big hole right
Oh yeah. It's thin right in there. We're getting a little light in there. Should help fill out anything too. It's shading itself out a bit now. But see this big, can you see that big limb right there, Steph? There you go. Anything else that's sticking up that you can see?
I think you're fine up, but this over here, there's one coming way far out.
Okay. Okay, I'll come around there. Oh yeah, this one right here. Mm-hmm. Do you think that if I just take that one, is that enough?
That's perfect.
Okay, all right. See, I just took the one that was sitting down below the other one, and that stood it up some. Okay. It's quite the pile of material.
That might be about it.
Okay, I got you. Nothing else? I'm gonna clean a couple of these little pieces that are very, very low off. There's a vertical piece going up through the middle of it, right there, that I'm taking out, okay? And that's that. All right, how's it? Looks pretty good? All right, you can see the Empress of China dogwood is coloring up nicely. Some of them are a little whiter than others. The flowers start off green like that and then get whiter and whiter. I think it's still gonna be in flower potentially a little bit when people are here for the open garden. Last year it had long bloomed out because it was so hot last year and so dry that it was probably finishing up by now last year. And this year it's just getting started. I've got photos because there's a plant symposium in Raleigh that's the weekend before our open garden. And so I have a photo from 2 years ago with me and Buddy Lee with this thing in full bloom. So I know it's capable of, it moves around in the season. Last year it was much earlier. But they got this little Bonnie spirea back here, and it came out this season and grew a foot and bloomed. Still a couple of flower clusters left on it that are kind of okay, but it's pretty much past. I want to go ahead and cut this thing back pretty harshly actually, because it will flush back out and give you a few more flowers ultimately, and it's laying on a ton of stuff. So a lot of the pruning we do out here is rescuing things. This is the time of year you want to go out and look and make sure. So as an example, if I'm coming over here, Steph, this pink filigree Japanese maple was bitten off by a deer last year, okay? It's come out and it looks okay, but that's the kind of thing that could have stimulated growth down below the graft of that plant. It could have caused me a problem. So go out and look at any of your grafted plants, like your Japanese maples. Make sure there's no growth coming out below the graft. Make sure that everything's clean down at the bottom. Any of your suckering shrubs, your ruby spice clethra or whatever it is that has a tendency to sucker in the garden, this would be the time of the year you'd have tons of suckers. Crepe myrtles that sucker a lot, and go ahead and chop those off. Don't give those suckers, if you are in fact going to control the suckering and you don't want it to become, a suckering thing and take over a big area. If you give those suckers time above the ground, they're gathering energy and they're just making it harder to get rid of them in the future. So go ahead and chop them off. But any of that stuff, as this stuff is leafed out, flowered, that kind of thing, just make a quick walkthrough and make sure you don't have additional problems you haven't seen yet. But this spirea just needs a good taming, basically. So I don't meatball a lot of things out here, but this is definitely a meatball operation. It's laying on a butterfly bush over there. It's laying on all kinds of things. And I'll just take this material and this is just a chop and drop operation. This stuff right here, I will just keep right here in place and pop it right under the plant. It can mulch itself. I don't have to pay to mulch it. It can just. What's that? Yeah, that's what I said. When you prune these spirea back, they're likely to come back out of it and bloom a little bit more. They won't bloom as heavily as they did before, but they're liable to. Oh, I can actually walk back here now. Amazing. This area's just been cut off because of these spirea. We got bulbs lingering in the garden out here this year. It's been cooler, and so they've had much more of a chance to gain energy, which is good. They'll be better off for it next winter, but they're unfortunately also lingering here in the garden where other perennials are trying to occupy that space. I think this one is suckering, so this spirea is trying to head off in this general direction over here. I'm going to stop that from happening. I think that's that butterfly bush right there. All right, so that's a butcher job right there. That's a different kind of pruning than I did on the Indian hawthorn, but it'll flush. Some plants you got to know, like the spirea, are so tough. It doesn't matter. This thing will be covered back up in new growth by the time people are here on June 20th. The Shasta Viburnum, which we've been limbing up into a small tree over the last couple of years, is number one. It's beautiful, and it was in full flower several weeks back now. It's one of the earlier flowering things in the garden. It was just solid white across the whole top of it. The foliage is just perfect. It's just a perfect plant, really. But it continues to need to be limbed up. We're gonna have to get it higher up off the ground. It's so, this layering that it has is so full and so dense, it doesn't allow any light underneath it whatsoever. It is being weighted down right this second by some water. So before I prune on it, I'm gonna give it a shake just to get a little of that weight out of it and make sure that I'm not cutting something that doesn't necessarily need to be cut off. If it was dry, it would pop back up. The path, again, the pile from the Indian hawthorn here, but now I'm at least on the path, but there's some of this is now coming out onto the path as well. So I'm going to cure this problem first, and I'm just taking it back to where there's other branching coming off the side of it. If I do that, if I follow one of these branches back to another place where it branches on the stem and cut it, you really just can't see, that you cut it as much. So that's kind of the way I tackle that. And sometimes just taking those ends of those branches off is enough to stand it back up where I won't have to cut the whole thing off. But again, I'm just trying to make sure that when folks are here for the open garden that they can actually walk. Well, heck, I'm trying to get it where we can mulch. I can't even mulch out here very well, probably. I will take that side branch off there. But that's already better, right, Steph? Okay, all right. I think people can get through here now, and I'm gonna have to go under here though and start limbing it up some more. After it flowered, it starts to set these fruit or berries on the top here. They're starting to form now. They may be colored up by the time folks are here, so we'll get another round of color coming on it. But look how nice the foliage is on that plant. But you can also, again, see how thick it is, that it's gonna shade everything below it. Over there, I'm gonna take that much of that one off. Okay. All right, I think it's just time to take this one completely up, huh? Right there. I got my saw and my pruners. If it's something bigger than the saw, I'll use it. I'm gonna go ahead and take that just to get some light down here on these hosta. And this. Okay, Steph. Now, this is what I was talking about with the suckering. Under here, you see all these, anytime you're pruning on things like this and you're doing this kind of work, you could stimulate growth down at the bottom. This is stuff I want to get rid of. You guys don't necessarily need to see every one of those cuts, but you get the point. I'll get all that stuff cleared out. Anything that's trying to grow along the branch, any vertical growth that's in something, I cut a big vertical piece that was in that Indian hawthorn out. But if you'll get the occasional sucker down here that'll just shoot straight up through the middle of the plant, those I cut out. This branch right here, Steph, do you think the whole branch should just go ahead and go, or just that bottom piece right there?
The whole branch.
Okay, the whole branch. Okay. All right, so we'll saw that one off. This one doesn't need the 3-cut method. Normally I'll cut the back of the limb like this. Well, I'll go ahead and show you how I normally do it. I just make a cut along the bottom. It's hard to do it from this angle. I'm not in an angle to actually do it. I'll do it on the next one. I'll show you. I don't need to do it on this one. It's just not heavy enough to need it. It's not gonna break if I hold it. Okay, ooh, that's a big branch, isn't it? Okay, all right, smaller one here. This little one right here for sure that's laying on there. What about this whole piece? Okay, all right. That's a pretty big limb, so You want to try to get closer and I can show them how to prune this thing off? This is a pretty big limb that's laying over top of this clethra back here, preventing it from growing. So I'm going to show you how I just go underneath this limb and make a back cut underneath, just like that. Not enough where it will pinch the blade. And then go to the other, then go in front of it like that. And then when this thing breaks off, it'll just snap to that spot that I just cut. That was literally a perfect example of it. If that back cut hadn't have been there, it would have peeled potentially along the bark there and done some significant damage to it. But that was a big cut. And then I go back in here closer to the collar and make a clean cut like that. Okay, make sure your tools are good and sharp. But that clethra now, or clayera, sorry, is going to have a much better chance of finding some light and filling in back there. I'm going to cut that one out as well. That's pretty much it, right, Stu? Okay, all right. All right, I think everything else will stand back up from the when the water dries. I think you can see how big of a difference we've actually made. You could barely walk through here this morning. Like literally, I could barely walk through here like this. And now the Distilleum, we'll get some light on it that's underneath that. Although the hellebores and the hosta and all those things are shade plants, the amount of shade that this thing produces is kind of crazy. And now you can see where we've turned it into a tree farm again, right? You can see up under there, and the camellias in the back will be happier. Everything over here will be happier, and I'll be happier when these bulbs have completely died back to the ground. Pearls of Perfume Philadelphus has finished its initial spring flowering. It had has one of the flowers left on it. This thing was so fragrant and so covered in flowers, but you can see it's a double flower, a little different than most of the other Philadelphus. It needs a bit of a pruning. It's got this tall, narrow habit, which is literally perfect for this garden. Either, we're tree forming things over there to make room underneath, or we're finding tall, narrow things to plant out here so that we can have lots of things. If we get super wide things, we won't have as many things. But this one is starting to stretch a bit, and I think it's going to splay open. As it gets growth on it like this, I think that weight is going to make it just kind of splay open ultimately. So I'll find a place along one of these main tall branches that have stretched where it's already got some growth on it, and I'll just cut it to there. So basically, I made that cut, and I think in a few days you'll never know that I made that cut. So that's the when I'm doing this kind of intentional pruning. Obviously, you can tell I pruned that spirea because I turned it into a meatball over there. But the other things I've pruned this morning, like from here, I can't tell those things were pruned this morning at all. If I got it there and really examined it, I could tell. But when you make cuts that are intentional, again, along the side of this big old tall branch right here, there's growth on the side of it, right there. So if I cut this right here, if I get in there within a week or two, that growth will be 6 inches long. This thing grows so fast that it will cover that cut up, and you'll never know that I actually did it. So that's all I'm doing. I'm looking on these stems, finding where I think that they'll grow out from, and cutting them down to there. And this thing, as Steph just said, will continue flowering all summer. It really flowered until November last year. It doesn't flower as heavy as it did the first go round, but it will have residual flowers on it. Here's an awkward one, but I'll cut it down to where there's a bud on the stem where I think it will come from. It just didn't have anything growing on the stem all the way down. So I cut it right above where I think I'll get growth on the side of that branch from. And how's that stuff? These ones that are so vigorous, I'll go ahead and cut those too because they're going to jump ahead of everything. It's actually got some buds on it, weirdly. It actually has some flower buds on it already again. Not a lot, but a few. Just those more vigorous ones. Okay, that's okay, right? I think within a week or so, because I left growth on it, because I left places where I cut it, it has growth really quickly. It'll cover up anything I just did. This is kind of what I was talking about. We have the Amelanchier out here in the front garden, And the trunk, when we first got it, was so thin that I had to stake it, and it's still staked. In fact, I just changed the bands on it not that long ago in a video. So I think it'll stay staked the rest of this year. But then after that, I think I finally have enough, hopefully, strength to hold the rest of the tree up moving forward, and I can take this stake off. But the pruning I've done on the top to slow the top down has caused some suckering down here at the bottom. So if I look down, you know, as I'm examining these plants, right down at the bottom of this tree, you know, I've got suckers coming from the base, and these are the kinds of things I want to go ahead and get rid of, because I don't really want the tree putting its energy into, you know, growing 14 trunks. These are multi-trunked in the wild. Normal Amelanchier is a multi-trunk shrub, really, a large shrub. We'll call them small ornamental trees, but well, I think you would define it though as just a large shrub overall. But this one is a single trunked one, and it's going to try to sucker in the future. And any pruning I do on top of it's going to encourage more of that. I'm hoping I don't have to prune it at the top anymore, but that's another thing to go and clean up. The Edgeworthia, which absolutely grows perfect on its own. I mean, it just doesn't require any pruning ever. It is going to ultimately get a little wider than we want here along the path, and you can already see that. I want people to be able to have the flow of traffic all the way around the garden. We have interconnected trail system here, and this thing's in full growth right now. It buds up in the fall, blooms in February, March, depending on the winter that we've had, and then it starts to flush out. And when it puts on this new growth, once it gets to this size, it puts on quite a bit of new growth in a single season. These always branch in threes, and I've shown this in the past, but people that are new to the channel may not know what I'm talking about here. Everywhere on this plant that it branches in three. If you see how it branched in three right there, look down. Well, I made a cut on that one last year, but on this one, see where it branched in three? You can even see down in the plant, branched in three all the way down at the bottom. Each of these are a year. Branched in three, branched in three, branched in three, so on and so forth. It's kind of interesting to see that. That branching into three is what keeps it growing this uniform. It's basically trying to take up as much space as it can to get as much sunlight as it can, right? And it's made this, it's absolutely set itself up perfect to absorb as much of the sun's energy as possible. It's kind of interesting. A little adaptation it's made, but I have to take one of these three off every year that's hanging low on this side of the plant. Otherwise, it will eat the trail. This one I'm going to cut back to last year's growth, but you see that I can just take the bottom one off, and that takes the weight off of it. Here's last year's grouping of three right there. I'll just take that bottom one off. Boom, and it stands it back up into the plant, and that's all I got to do. Here's one branched into three. I take the bottom one off, it's out of the way. This one, same thing. I'll actually go and take back to 2 years ago and take the bottom one off, and I think that's good, right, Steph? Actually, I might take one more back here just to take a little weight off of that, get off of that hosta that's back there under it. What do you think overall? Oh, there. Okay, I've got a couple branches laying on the Sarcococa, so I'll do the same thing. Just take that bottom branch off of these. Is that going to be good enough, you think? Okay, that should be good enough. It's wet too, so it's going to stand up a little bit more than it is right now. So there's some of the things we have going on in the garden. I've got myself, we needed to do this. If we'd have waited, you know, it's one of those things where when you have plants that have outgrown their space and they're being weighted down by the water, it's best just to go ahead and go out there and do it. But man, turn all the way around and look at that Shasta Viburnum from this angle stuff. You see that? How nice that is now? Got cleanup to do underneath it, but it looks so good layered up like that, and everything around it now has room to operate and to get bigger this year. We'll have to do that a little bit every year to get that completely under control. So there's some of the maintenance things we have going on. It's not a lot, and honestly, I always say if I wasn't talking to the camera, this would have taken 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And then we'd have grabbed the piles of bigger stuff and thrown it on a pile. Anything that's smaller, like those spirea cuttings over there, or even that Philadelphus, those cuttings over there, they just go right under the plant where you can't see them, and I just leave them there. I don't really think about it, and let them mulch themselves, especially if it's in good shape. I don't do that if something's diseased, right, or has some sort of insect problem. Those things I would dispose of differently. But if they're in good shape, just let them mulch themselves and move on. Reclaim your time. The next few days, we're going to be mulching our annuals with some pine bark, just to try to get some sort of decorative top on them and prevent some weeds for the rest of the season. So you'll see that in a video. And then we're going to be mulching, prepping, and then mulching the garden where we can. We've got so much of the ground covered up now. There's not going to require a heck of a lot of mulch. Will require some effort though, because when you have these little spots like this, I can't exactly go dump a wheelbarrow in here. So we'll probably have to do it in buckets and that kind of thing. So it will take a little effort, but it'll be worth it. When we get that finished, you'll have the defined path from the wood chips, which is a lighter color. And then in places where we have annuals, we'll have some pine bark, and then everything else, all the woody plants out here, will be a much darker hardwood mulch. And that color contrast in these beds, and then with the fresh growth that the plants have on them this time of year, was really what makes this pop. So you'll see that evolve over the next couple of weeks. Thanks for watching.